Happy Friday, everyone. Going to be talking about the name, image, and likeness policy with Florida State Representative Chip Lamarca. Kudos to Timur Urikoff for the next iteration of the mug. Hey, Chip, how you doing?
Good. How are you doing, Doc?
I'm all right. I'm all right. Thanks for joining us. How's everything today?
Good. I got a terrible sty in my eye here, so figured I'd get some medical attention while I'm on the phone with you. We we had to move forward with this important topic.
I hear you, man. I hear you. Listen, man. Thanks for making time for us. I'm going to do a brief introduction about you just while people are logging on here.
Okay.
So we're lucky to be speaking with Chip Lamarca. Chip serves as the Florida State House of Representatives representing District 93. He has earned a reputation for being a citizens advocate over the years. As background, he attended Boston University, Broward College, and then FAU. In 2010, he became Broward County Mayor. And then following that, he served as the chair of Finance, Tax, and Administration Committee for the Florida Association of Counties. On a national level, Chip has been selected to the chair of Finance, Pension, and Intergovernmental Affairs Committee for the National Association of Counties and serves as the member of the board of directors. In 2018, he was elected to the Florida State House of Representatives, as I said, representing District 93. And what we're going to be talking about today is the NCAA policy of name, image, and likeness. Recently, the Supreme Court ruled in favor of allowing NCAA athletes compensation called the name, image, and likeness policy. Of note, Chip played a major role in passing this policy, especially down here in Florida. So his push was really monumental. So here to discuss that policy and really what it means for the future of the NCAA. So again, Chip, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
So I guess we'll just start with a little basics. What exactly does the name, image, and likeness policy mean, just for the layperson?
Okay. So, and just to kind of give a little background, it is, and I know your title to get folks on here was enticing, but it's not pay for play. It is the ability for every college athlete of any gender or sport to be treated just like you or I were in college. And that's the ability to enter the free market for using their name, image, or likeness, who they are, to be able to do advertisements, quite honestly, invent something, build something. All of that was banned prior to this legislation in Florida by the NCAA. And now that the NCAA folded like a $2 tent, it is now legal across the entire country. But I like to believe we were the leader in this process in Florida, because we kept an earlier date than California. That was July 1 of this year. So that's when it actually became legal to get endorsements or advertisements to benefit off your name, image, or likeness as an athlete.
Now, so you were saying Florida got in on it first. Currently, is it standardized across the country, or is the policy different for different states?
Yes, so California actually passed their law first back in 20. But what was interesting was they did not have an early date like we did. We knew their date was January 2023. So when we started writing this legislation, we were originally going to be January of 2021 or 2020, sorry, which would have been nearly impossible because we had just passed it in 20, and it would have been difficult. So what we made the date is July 1, 2021, which would just pass a few months ago. No one in the right mind would have predicted we'd have a global pandemic, let alone something that would shut down college sports. So it's better that we did obviously wait to this year, and we're actually seeing athletes just like your quarterback at Miami, De'Ara King, taking advantage of this, as well as at Florida State and other places around the state of Florida and in other sports. And like I said, we've seen some really interesting deals so far. But we were the first that would have actually ticked on July 1. And then what happened, as you can imagine, is the SEC, for the most part, and I say that because it was Alabama, Georgia, Mississippi, Louisiana, and those states kind of came on board to also share July 1. And a few weeks before that happened, the NCAA basically just vacated that entire section of their bylaws, which basically said, all states go out and do this, do whatever you want. They kind of threw their hands up, and I think it would have been better off if they would have been able to come up with a plan to do this years ago. But that's kind of why we jumped in, and we wanted to make sure that athletes in Florida were treated fairly, just like other college students.
Now, how many years has this been in the making? I feel like I've heard rumblings about this for a long time. How long have you been working on this?
So I got into this concept really kind of looking at what California was doing and just having a conversation. Had many conversations with my former aide. Now he's an external affairs director at one of the platforms called Dreamfield. And he and I had been talking about it for a few years, but we didn't really think state legislatures could change a law within the state until we said, well, wait a minute. Outside of the University of Miami being private, all of the public institutions where these kids play sports, these college students play sports and college athletics, where they're governed by the state to a degree where we fund a significant portion of that, how they operate and all that. So we put it up in the legislature 2 years ago. At the time, Speaker Jose Oliva was more than happy to let us, kind of explore the process. And we had actually was very interesting. We had 3 committees that had to get through in the House, and we had a room that was basically all 60 committee members of those, so 20 each per committee were in there. We had a professor from Tulane, a compliance officer. We also had somebody from the National Collegiate Players Association and some other experts kind of in the field to have this really vet out this topic before we did anything. And I think what was cool about the Florida law is we allowed schools to basically follow. It was a pretty basic framework, but allow schools to follow their team rules. In other words, if something wasn't okay to do at Florida State, but was okay to do at Miami or FAU, the schools could kind of play that out. But ultimately, going back in the timeline, it's only been a few years.
And, if you look at it, it seems like the fair thing to do, right? Athletes are making money for the school. It seems like just the right and the most fair thing to do. What was the biggest resistance you guys met when you were pushing this policy forward?
So, well, obviously the NCAA was probably the biggest resistance. It bears saying, obviously, when we talk about making money, the University of Miami or Florida State, for example, are probably way down the revenue chain as compared to, say, Florida or some of the SEC schools or Notre Dame. But really, the organization that was really bringing in the money was the NCAA. And when you think about that part, that was probably part of the pushback. But even doing the process, it was very it was really cool to do to run the legislation because it was very bipartisan. It was actually nonpartisan. I worked on it with a former member from the Miami area, and ultimately I didn't have any pushback on the Democrat side. The only people that pushed back, I had a few on the R side that were seemed to be SEC fans. So it seemed to be kind of more of a protection of what they believe, the character of college football. And I kept saying, look, it's not, things are happening right now. So I don't believe it's going to change it, but it's about more than just football. It's about, women's gymnastics or soccer or, tennis or golf and other men's and women's sports. So, I mean, really one of the coolest things recently, and I'd love to, kind of talk about some of the deals that have happened, but, just broke this week that the Florida Atlantic University partnered with the Florida Panthers and Dreamfield to actually do a sponsorship for all of their female athletes, 200 female athletes at FAU. And what they've got is a framework in place that says, all right, well, we'll connect you with these opportunities, but it was specifically for female athletes. So I think it kind of debunks the idea that it's just for 2 or 3 football players and maybe 1 baseball player.
I mean, I would say let's get into some details because people think, oh, these athletes are making money for their play. Just like you said, that's not true.
Right.
Explain how these college athletes can make money. How can they make endorsements, and what are the regulations?
So very simple. They can do advertisement deals. They can be an ambassador for a company. I'll use Derek, for example. He's working with a moving company, College Hunks. He's working with an automotive dealership and some other ones. And his requirement or his, what he needs to do before he can make a nickel off of this is he has to do something for them. So it's truly a good use of the phrase quid pro quo. He's got to go do social media. He's got to show up at different events for these businesses. I think he does some work for the Wharf in Miami, which is a restaurant. So he's got to make himself available. And what the athletes typically do is they'll say, well, I'm available at these times, and this is my rate. I mean, there's a quarterback at Ole Miss, and I think his rate is $10,000 an hour. I think De'Eric's a couple thousand. Mackenzie Milton up at Florida State's 2,500. There's a woman, female golfer, and some other folks that are, kind of in that $500 to $1,000, $1,500 range. And you can kind of see who they are first, and then what they need to do to be able to earn money off their name, image, and likeness is to, again, it's either, social media tweets or posts, or they can, quite honestly, they can go do other things if they have a talent in music or a YouTube channel. I mean, that was kind of what started all this. It was a field goal kicker at the University of Central Florida named Donald Delahaye, who basically had to choose between his scholarship and his education and playing, on Saturdays, or being able to make YouTube videos. And he chose the free market, and, good for him because he's making a lot of money doing it, but unfortunately couldn't finish his education. So this will allow students to be able to do all kinds of things, but they actually have to do something to make the money. Your other part of the question was, what are the regulations, or what are the kind of the guidelines or parameters? And Florida's pretty basic. Look, you have to have in year 1 and year 3 financial and life skills education. So life's basically, you're going to make some money. Here's what, here's how you should be able to, utilize that, but at the same time, saving credit, why credit's important, things like that. So the guidelines are really going to be university driven. And I mean, there was an early deal with the University of Miami, for example, that wasn't quite within the Florida, what we thought, the boundaries of the Florida law was. And it was just using my perception. This is it's not a hit on the U, because we sat with them first before anyone when we were in the process, but it was no different than paying players because you wanted to, but using this as a format. So we ultimately said, no, you need to go do something with that business. So if you want to pay every player a stipend every month, they've got to go do something for your business. So that's how these are all kind of shaping up. And ultimately it's anything from the quarterback at FAU, which is obviously not, Division One, what we're thinking of as far as, the U or Florida State or UCF, but he's got a deal with, a cinnamon bun bakery across from campus in Boca. So, I mean, he's, they're all having the opportunity to get something.
Now so that's interesting. You're saying that the regulations are different at every university. So the players have to know what the regulations are, and those can change depending on, like you said, Florida, Florida State, Miami. They all have different restrictions on what these players can do.
Well, so not so much regulations. They basically still have to follow the team rules. Kind of think of it as if you're following the rules of the state of Florida as a medical doctor, but there may be different rules in, one hospital or one institution over another. So it's really, I think there's a deal with one of the players who's 21 at FAU for Island Rada Beer Company, one of those craft breweries, whereas that wouldn't be okay if it was a 19-year-old player or an 18-year-old player. So it's still going to follow team rules.
Got you. Now, so what's the biggest income generator here? Because it sounds like social media is really the largest income generator for these student athletes. Is that the case?
Doctor, I think it's kind of a combination of, yes, that's it, but it's also other forms of advertising. You think about, how people get their news, or how people get the word out of what they want to sell, or service or product they want to sell. It could be actually in-person, events. For example, I'm going to use De'Eric again at this College Hunks moving junk business that was started at UM. He's done some events where he'd show up there, or a car dealership he'd show up. And then maybe kind of, I don't know the specifics to all the deals, but maybe the, kind of the maintenance piece of that. I've done the show up part, but now I'm going to go do some tweets and Instagram posts and Facebook posts about, the car dealership that's paying me. So maybe the deal is they've got to do something once a week, come out and support your local business and De'Eric King or something.
Got you. Now, what about merchandise at the university? So, for example, if Miami sells a De'Eric King jersey, a legitimate, jersey for, let's say, $70, is there any of that goes to De'Eric, or is that off limits?
That was probably the biggest conversation we had early on with the university, not just the University of Miami, but other ones as well. And it was the understanding there's not that much that comes in through that. But ultimately, look, if there's a $10, profit made to the university off of that, I think that would also kind of depend on some of the universities for details on that. But I know that you talk about apparel. I mean, some of these athletes are actually creating their own brand. I know that there's a tight end up at Florida State that transferred from USC, believe it or not. The day I met him, it was a proud moment for a fiscal conservative in the state house that he said to me, he said, I came to Florida because you have no income tax, you have NIL, I want to make money off my name, and I don't want to pay taxes, like I would in California. But he actually has a brand, and so does De'Ara King, of their, kind of their identity, and they're selling some tees and sweats and other things. So I think in that area they obviously can make a significant more amount than off the jersey, but have to get kind of on that.
Yeah. Now, what about having agents? Since now these athletes are able to secure endorsements, can college athletes have agents as a freshman that can help look for endorsements, look for opportunities to make money?
They can. This law made it actually. This law in the NCAA, removing that section. But in Florida, they can have agents. But a couple of those names that I've mentioned, the quarterbacks at those two schools, and again, I don't want to make this only about football, but that's kind of where the start is. That's the kickoff, and literally that's where some of these first deals are. But those two players, they're not actually represented by agents. They're actually represented by one of the platforms, the one I mentioned, Dreamfield, and they actually, it's almost really a virtual agent. I mean, it's a platform whereby they can connect with. I'll give you an example. If you had you're a brain surgeon, I'm a legislator. Let's talk about, if you had a spine clinic or some type of medical business, or if you had a restaurant or any type of business, you go on the platform similar to, I can only speak about Dreamfield because that's the one I'm familiar with, but you put your business on there. There's no cost to do that. The athletes sign up and they basically decide what their value is. And it's kind of a meeting place. It's a digital marketplace. And ultimately, if, say, Derek wants to go do an endorsement or do something on a Saturday next week, and he's got some time set aside, which, if it was a bye week or something, he could set something up, and that's how that connection would be made. So you don't absolutely need an agent, but now under this law, agents are allowed to work with college players.
I mean, it sounds almost like a headhunting firm, basically. You put down what you're offering, and then the athletes can say, yeah, this sounds good, I want to get involved or not. Is that basically what it is? It's almost like it's like Monster.com.
Yeah, well, it's that, and it's also kind of like an Airbnb. I mean, you decide, myself and the family want to go to, Caribbean island, we want to find a house on this island, what's out there. The person put their house out there. And the interesting thing, again, on this particular one, the athlete doesn't pay anything to that type of the platform. The business that would, for example, there was a deal done at the Wharf and one up at Miller's Ale House in Tallahassee. Each of those, if they paid $1,000 to the athlete, would pay a small percentage to have them come. So the athlete wouldn't lose anything from it. And I think it's my understanding they're also working to do some withholding and other things as they're independent. I believe they're all independent contractors. So it would basically kind of guide them and say, hey, look, here's roughly where you are as a tax bracket as a student. And if you're making $200,000, $300,000, some of these guys are going to make $200,000, $300,000, $400,000. Here's what you need to save because the tax man's coming at the end of the year either way.
Got you. Now, something I've heard a lot about is people are worried about kind of Pandora's Box, meaning that you're opening up something that's brand new, something that's been taboo for decades, and there's a lot of vague rules, a lot of potential loopholes. Who's monitoring, who's controlling so that this doesn't get out of hand and so that illegal stuff is not done?
So each of the university's compliance departments have to lay their eyes on the deal, make sure it's okay. I would say about Pandora's Box, I think this cleans up what was already going on. I mean, we've all heard the stories of duffel bags of cash, more around Tuscaloosa than around Coral Gables, but nonetheless, we know that kind of stuff happened, and this really kind of puts some teeth into and some guidelines into making sure the universities have the opportunity to lay their eyes on the deal, and hopefully they will advise the athlete, oh, this isn't a good deal. But to be very clear, the universities or the direct support organizations, which some universities have, that kind of outsources their athletics department as far as the finances go, they can't do any financial arrangements with the athletes. In other words, they can't get them deals. They can't do deals with them. if someone wants to do a deal with the entire university, now I'm talking about Florida, I believe it was in Utah, there's a university that BYU did a deal with the entire university, the entire team. So, that's different. That can't happen in Florida. We may look to update or, I would say normally strengthen, but it seems like what we have in Florida is a little stronger than the rest of the country because we were trying to stay within the confines of something that's common sense, would allow the athlete to enter the free market and do things by the book and have some good compliance and regulatory policy in there. Then some of the other states have just kind of blown the doors wide open. So I think if Pandora's Box exists, it exists in other states.
Which also brings up the point, how does this affect future recruiting? I mean, if you're a top high school athlete and you're looking at offers out in California, Florida, Texas, New York, and Florida allows you to make the most money off of your, name, image, and likeness, how is this going to affect recruiting? It seems like it's going to have a major impact.
Well, it's pretty common knowledge now from talking to some of the folks at multiple schools that, for example, the University of Miami has been recruiting off of it since the past year and a half ago. We know Florida State had an arrangement, kind of advertising and with their program that, as they were recruiting, they were doing the same thing. So I think we're already seeing that. And again, I'll use the tight end from FSU coming from the University of Southern California, pretty darn good school, but he made the decision based on he could do NIL in Florida and take advantage of some other things.
And this is obviously very different than, let's say, boosters, but people know the word boosters. And what's the difference between this policy and the term boosters, which was used in the past?
Well, boosters are still boosters. I mean, you have people that are proud of the university or college they went to. They can still support them. They can't just pay a player because they want to help them out. What they can do is they can do an NIL deal with this, where it's under compliance. You can't, we're pretty clear in Florida when we said that we want athletes in year 1 and year 3 to have financial literacy and life skills, training 5 hours, each of those 2 years. We looked at some of the other universities, some of the larger ones kind of north of us. And, we said, well, we want to make sure this is not a booster, from ABC Bank. And that's just a way for them to, sell them high interest credit cards or get them, opportunities. And we actually found out that was the case at some of the universities that, they had boosters that were presidents of the bank. So we basically said, no, this has got to be a completely outside of that framework deal where the kids are getting education and financial literacy and how to build good credit and have a good future. And you're working with boosters on it. But there's all kinds of other deals with boosters. I mean, the way they defined boosters, at least in the past, was if you made a contribution to bought, a game ticket, which to me, that's not a booster, someone that, writes a significant check in order to help maybe build a new, training facility like you have down south or whatever it might be.
Got you. Now, another concern is the kind of gender issues. And you brought this up earlier. It seems like from the start, that obviously the male athletes would be able to generate a much higher income than would the female athletes. What is the NCAA doing to kind of even the playing field, so to speak?
Well, they're not doing anything. They basically threw their hands up on NIL completely, and they just, again, I wish they would have, done something a few years ago to start putting this, process in place, but they left it up to us. And so ultimately, they're not doing anything. And what I would tell you is that probably one of the most sought after athletes that would have been a year and a half ago when this bill was passing was a collegiate soccer player, Dana Castellano. She was from Venezuela. She was playing up at Florida State. They won a national championship in the women's soccer. But most importantly, her star power, her athletic ability, her personality, all that aside, she had 1.3 and then ended up 1.5 million Instagram followers. She had offers to do sunglass ads, all kinds of different things, product ads, and she couldn't do that. The minute she left the Civic Center in Tallahassee with her degree, she went across the street to a hotel conference center and signed a deal with an agent as a professional soccer player playing in Spain and Real Madrid, and she ultimately signed a 7-figure deal with Nike. So I mean, she could have done with NIL. She could have done that in college, and I personally think that blows out of the water really any of these deals we've seen so far. And I think the right female athletes, could be golf, tennis, soccer, pick your sport. I mean, some of those have much bigger international appeal than our good old American football with the guys play. So I think there's opportunities out there, and it was always our conversation that we always start people always want to start the conversation with the quarterback and the sport of football or basketball maybe. But ultimately, I just think there are more opportunities out there for the total package of a good athlete, a smart student, and savvy business person, an attractive person, just like the rest of the world, right? Marketing for anything, and I think I personally think female athletes will have an edge.
Oh, that's great to hear. One of the interesting scenarios I saw was, what about bowl games, right? A lot of the people who are NFL draft eligible, who are going to be top draft picks, a lot of times sit out the bowl game because they're fear of getting injured. Do you think we're going to see bowls paying athletes to play, in terms of incentivizing them to not sit out? I mean, is that something that's going to be legal? So could the Orange Bowl pay a player from whatever university is playing, if that person wasn't going to play because of fear of injury, pay them to play? Is that something that's legal?
Yeah, well, you can't get paid to play. There's no such thing as pay to play. That's still illegal. But from a standpoint of maybe the bowl game, like we'll say the Orange Bowl, but maybe it's not the Orange, the Orange Bowl organization, which know a lot of folks on that, but maybe it's FedEx, and they would say they want to make sure the quarterback starts for Miami if they're in the Orange Bowl. They could actually do a deal directly with that player, but it would have to be a deal for their name, image, and likeness, not just to go down and play the game in early January. Got you.
One last question here, just because we're wrapping it up. Do you think Reggie Bush should get his Heisman back? That's a big controversy now that this was passed. Reggie Bush was involved in something very similar, was getting paid by USC, and his family was getting supported. Do you think with this new NIL policy, do you think Reggie Bush should get his Heisman back?
If you're asking my opinion, or as it reflects to the law, as my opinion is Reggie Bush should get his Heisman back, but I don't think he ever gave it to the the Heisman organization. And quite honestly, Pete Rose should be in the Hall of Fame. People should get a second chance.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with that. Listen, Chip, thank you so much for joining us. I know you're super busy, and it's been half an hour. This is a huge policy. I think it's just the beginning, like you were saying. And I think as it evolves, as we get more comfortable with it, as the colleges become more comfortable, we're going to see a lot more of these college athletes getting paid, which is what they deserve, to be honest with you. So, thanks for pushing it through. Thanks for all your efforts, and thanks for all you do here in Florida.
Appreciate it. Thank you for what you do to save lives and keep people healthy, and look forward to speaking to you again.